Hello, Internet, and welcome back to another episode of Meet La Prensa. Today's topic with Pablo and I, it's going to be about the budget reconciliation that's in Congress today. There's a lot of talk about this $3.5 million budget, but with trillion, I'm sorry, $3.5 trillion budget. I apologize.
Huge number.
Huge number. But within that budget, there are some allocations that are supposed to address, for the first time in probably in a generation, a pathway to citizenship. Pablo, you've been writing about this topic for a while. Talk to us about where things stand and what are the chances of them passing through and making it happen.
Well, so I've talked to a lot of people who the thing about immigration reform and the thing about permanent relief for immigrants is that it's really hard to find anyone in Congress who remembers the last time there was a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. The last time that actually happened was 1984 through a bill called IRCA. I don't remember what. I don't even remember what the acronym is.
I was young, dude, and I remember that. It was during the Reagan era, wasn't it?
It was. Yeah, it was.
And I think he got a lot of crap for it back in the day. But yet, a Republican president was the last one that passed, a huge. I mean, they called it amnesty. Everyone was calling it back in the day.
Yeah, it's funny because amnesty because of the way, people will argue that because of the way that IRCA was handled, the word amnesty became poisonous. It became toxic in American politics. But honestly, as you and I know, the progressive left has seeded a lot of words that actually have deep roots in conservative Christianity. Words like amnesty that you can find all throughout the Bible, right? Have become somehow liberal or leftist or whatever. But really what it's about is relief, permanent relief for people who are here, for people who are doing the jobs that Americans, largely don't want to do. I sent the United Farm Workers have a great series of videos on their Twitter right now of people just doing their jobs out in the fields, right? Like picking apples, picking onions and things like that. If you're not following them already, the United Farm Workers on Twitter is a really great account to follow if you don't know just how hard immigrants work. And I would love anybody in the YouTube community to tell us that they would like to take that job from an undocumented immigrant out there in the field. Cause I would like to talk to you if you're the one gringo in this country who actually wants that.
On the UFW, I just watched the video. Unfortunately, we'll put it in the link in the description here so you guys can check it out. And we'll also put the UFW's Twitter account in the description so you guys can check that out as well and follow them. But I was watching this video and it's literally showing, a migrant worker picking apples. That basket it's got to weigh 40, 50 pounds, and they get paid by the bushels of, basket that they're, getting. But she's making a plea to pretty much what you just said. Hey, she's asking the governor of that state of Washington, I believe, hey, come out here and work for one day with us, just so you can see what's going on, see the conditions, right? And it's, and
the hashtag is that they use the hashtag take our jobs, which I think is just brilliant.
Yeah, and
absolutely
if you think
brilliant.
About it, people always complain about that. It's like, but there's no American that I can think of that would go out there and be in those fields. I have relatives. I think you and I were speaking about over the weekend. I have my mom's uncle who lived primarily in Texas for many years. Him and his children were migrant workers, and they would just do the rounds from Texas to Michigan to Florida and just cruise around during the seasons, picking whatever was needed to be picked, and that's how they made a living. So yeah, I don't think Americans would take those jobs.
They are Americans. They're Latin American.
Yeah, true.
So, it's just one of those things. Basically, in Congress right now, the opportunity arises because Democrats have a slim majority in the House and Senate, right? And so far, within the Democratic caucuses in the House and Senate, there are no defections. Even Joe Manchin was the first person to really signal to the press. Shout out to Steve Dennis from Bloomberg, who tweeted, I don't know if it was Steve that asked the question, but it was Steve that tweeted it out, and it was the first time I saw it, right? It said, Manchin supports immigration reform through budget reconciliation, which I had no notion at the time. This was months ago, but I had no notion at the time that that immigration reform could fit into budget reconciliation. Right. So I started reading about budget reconciliation, and I talked to Tim Kaine, Senator Tim Kaine, and Tim Kaine told me maybe a couple weeks after that, or maybe in the week after that, he said, "Listen, there's actually precedent for including immigration reform, or at least including a pathway to citizenship in the budget reconciliation," right? Tim Kaine told me that there was a 2005 precedent. So I got to asking around, what is this 2005 precedent? I talked to some of our lawyer friends who have been on this show, and they told me that in 2005, the Senate parliamentarian, which is the Hill staffer who makes the decision as to what can and cannot fit into a package like this $3.5 trillion deal. The Senate parliamentarian said, yeah, it's okay to reallocate H-1B visas that haven't been used in the previous year in the current year. So it's basically, if you don't use all your visas, you can use them next year, which in essence created a pathway to citizenship in the moment. So there's that precedent. Then I talked to AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who told me that another precedent that they've been presenting, that they've identified, comes from the American Rescue Plan, which was just earlier this year, right? Where they defined what it meant to be an essential worker, right?
Wow.
So, right. So, and the parliamentarian again passed that. It was like, okay, this is an essential worker. An old parliamentarian, like a former parliamentarian, said, yes, you can create citizens through budget reconciliation. And then the current parliamentarian said, yes, this is an essential worker and it fits in into this framework, right? So when they combine these credentials, it creates a real possibility of creating a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. The one stipulation that these things have to have is a direct impact on revenue within the federal budget. Right. So study after study, and we know this, right? Like you and I know this.
Pablo, just
study
real quick, not to interrupt, just out of curiosity, when you say has to show a direct impact on revenue, like what's like for our viewers or viewers, like what's a good one or two examples of what that would look like? Do you have an idea of that?
Yeah. So the way that immigrants produce wealth in this country through taxation, let's say you have an immigrant that's working under the table right now as a busboy or something like that, getting paid in cash, right?
A lot of those.
They're not necessarily paying taxes, right? So if you legalize them, if you make them citizens, then obviously they're going to have to pay taxes, and their employer isn't going to, maybe their employer is going to have to pay them more. Either way, they're going to have to come out of the shadows in as much as it relates to a revenue impact, right? Another way that the revenue could be impacted in as much as it relates to the federal government is through fees associated with immigration, right? So the USCIS is likely, United States Customs Immigration Services, is a federal agency that's responsible for processing visas. Like they are the ones who, if you're not a citizen and you're trying to be a citizen, you have to appeal to them, right? Now, USCIS is self-funded. So when immigrants come through the USCIS process, right, they have to pay their own way, right? So there's the taxpayer does not pay for the legalization of immigrants, right? So let's say that 10 million people, 11 million people,
10 million customers.
It's 10 million customers. Exactly. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Overnight. Boom.
Overnight. Yeah. And that's revenue. That's real revenue for the American people, for the American budget, rather, like the federal budget. So I think the important thing, the biggest enemy or the biggest setback for this, this pathway to citizenship, this permanent immigrant relief right now, is a culture in Washington that is that produces a knee-jerk reaction to any time you say citizenship for immigrants. If you say citizenship for immigrants to most members of the Washington sort of political class, if you will, you know what I mean, like think tankers, press, whoever, right? Their knee-jerk reaction is like, no way. There's no way we're going to do a pathway to citizenship. Are you crazy? I mean, we're trying to run for office here. But so far, and these people don't matter. Reporters don't matter. Think tanks don't matter. Nobody matters except the Congress and the White House when it comes to like legislation. So if the lawmakers have been telling me without defections, every single person of the dozens and dozens and dozens of members of Congress who I've talked to about this have told me the same thing, who are on the Democratic side of the ticket, we support a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. But then when you talk to like most reporters, their knee-jerk reaction is like, no, that's not going to happen. I just don't believe that's going to happen. It's like, well, who the fuck cares what you believe? Right. I'm telling you what the lawmakers are saying. So when Joe Biden came out a month ago and said, look, I support a pathway to citizenship through budget reconciliation, that was sort of the final piece in the puzzle, right? It was like Congress is saying yes in the House and Senate. Biden is saying yes. And now the hard work of actually crafting this legislation comes into the fore. So I'm going back to the Capitol this week. I have meetings all week with Hill staffers, with reporting colleagues and all the rest, right? And I'm going to ask them, every single one of them who I meet with, right? What are you hearing about the budget reconciliation? And this is what I've been doing for a couple of months now. And again, literally no one has yet to tell me, no, man, this ain't happening. Like no one. The only people who are saying it's not happening is the press and the think tanks. And some of these think tanks, I'm just going to say this, some of these think tanks really just should be ashamed of themselves. And I'm talking about specifically the Center for American Progress. The Center for American Progress issued a statement the other day that said something like, well, we believe that 6 million immigrants could fit into budget reconciliation. 6 million. And now, Ivan, you and I know this is a much bigger problem than 6 million immigrants. Like there's relief that could be allocated to double that at least, right? So I asked them where they got their number from, and they wouldn't say. And the reason why I think, I could be wrong here, and if the Center for American Progress would like to have somebody on this show, we'd love to have you. But I think they just pulled the number out of their ass to be part of the conversation. And then by doing so, they ended up lowballing they ended up negotiating against themselves, within the framework. So anyway, long story short, this is happening. Regardless of what you like, regardless of what you hear, this is happening. And my concern as of right now is, right, that these heroes in the press, that these heroes in the think tank are going to end up negotiating this down. Like I talk to the old guard, the old guard in the Washington press as much as I can, like the people who have been there since the 90s.
Right.
If you've been reporting on the Capitol since the 90s, those are people who I like to talk to the most. Like I seek them out. I very humbly and respectfully seek their guidance, right? And these people are all telling me that, wow, this is the first time since they've been covering Congress, that since the Gang of Eight anyway, since that there's a real possibility for this, and that the Gang of Eight, at the end of the day, that they suspected at the time that it wasn't going to work out. They don't suspect right now that this is going to work out, right? Now, there are a lot of editors in Washington that just straight up don't like immigrants and are likely to assign a story that's like, go tell me why this isn't going to work. But at Latino Rebels within Futuro Media, we believe in immigrants. We are immigrants, right? So we want to know, we want to give lawmakers the opportunity to speak for themselves, because I, for one, as somebody who has been outside of the press corps for years and years, am tired of getting it spoon-fed to me, like the opinions.
Well, it's funny because you say, it sounds like from what you just described that if, that 6 million number, and journalists that are covering it and saying they don't believe it's going to happen, right? They don't think it's going to happen. It sounds like they're kind of setting it up to derail and be like because headlines drive a lot of policy decisions,
right?
Because politicians are always afraid of the headlines.
Right. And if you signal to them through your reporting that this isn't going to happen, then they're just going to be like, well, I don't want to put my neck out for immigrants because I just read it in Politico that says it's a long shot. Why would you put your career? Why would you put your political credibility on a long shot? And the sad thing is, I'll say this too, they get Latinos to cover the downfall of immigrants way too often. It's like the white editor gets some Latino who's willing to write a stupid story that throws immigrants under the bus. And that really pisses me off to no end, right? If you're a Latino and you're in the press corps and you're from an immigrant background and you like to celebrate your immigrant heritage every so often, right? Blah, 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 blah. You should be pushing back on the editors and being like, hold on a second, I'm an immigrant. Like, no one is going to tell their black reporter to go cover the sanctity of police.
I know 3 women that are, great reporters out there that would fit that bill that you're describing, that would do a better job covering the immigrant story.
Ooh.
What are the names? Lori, remember?
Lori, Lori Lizarraga.
Yeah, and Sonia, and
Gutierrez.
And I forgot the last one. Help me with the last name. The last one. Come on, it's coming. Oh gosh, it's coming. I'd have to check. Tell me.
You can see it, Kristen
Aguirre.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean all 3 of them would be well served to be covering the stories about immigrants in this country.
Yeah, and Milce Quiros, right? Like she from Latino Media, from Futuro Media. She has had 2 excellent immigrant-related pieces for Latino USA, right? Reynaldo at Latino USA. Maria Hinojosa, the greatest immigration reporter of all time in this country, right? These are all people who have been covering it for a long time, but for the first time now, we have an immigrant covering this in Congress where the decision about these things get made. And I'm not fucking around. Like, I am asking everybody the same question. Like, first, do you support the pathway to citizenship? And I have a list of the lawmakers who have said that they have. Now, whenever I see these lawmakers, I follow up with the same question. Do you have any new details about this? How does this work? And I'm starting to whittle it down more and more because the White House issued a list of categories of immigrants that could qualify for this, right? Dreamers, farm workers, essential workers, right? Essential workers is the place that you can you have some wiggle room, if you will. Like it could be a broad category.
It's very broad. It's very broad. But
it should be very broad. It should be very broad.
It should be because there's a lot of jobs that fall within there.
But because of what we'll call the Washington knee-jerk reaction to hating immigrants, it's just sort of like, no, man, that's just not going to work out. Well, Ted Lieu and Alex Padilla, and this is a story I'm writing today, right? Ted Lieu and Alex Padilla for LatinoRebels.com. They've started to create this comprehensive super list of what it means to be an essential worker in as much as it relates to the pandemic, in as much as it relates to life in America. And they are putting together this progressive super list. Now, the House, it's a committee work week this week, so I don't know who's in and who's out, right? Next week, the Senate will be back in session, and I will be asking Senator Alex Padilla, the freshman from California, about this list, right? How it's developing, how it's been received in this committee framework that the budget reconciliation is going through.
Maybe we can get a snapshot.
That's what we're hoping for. That's what we're hoping for. A snapshot of the pathway to citizenship is what I'm looking for. And so far, I don't have any competition in Congress, on this, in covering this story, right? There are other people who are covering it, sort of here and there, right? Mm-hmm. I will say shout out to Joseph from Business Insider, who actually got Tim Kaine to say whether or not this is a pay for or expenditure in the budget reconciliation framework, which is a really important thing, right? So direct revenue impact has basically been established, right? Immigrants create wealth. Everybody knows that. Every study of the last 30 years has shown that when you bring in an immigrant, it makes money. When you take care of an aging baby boomer, it costs money, right? So how these things measure out, within the budget reconciliation framework matters, right? So Senator Bernie Sanders, the chair of the Senate Budget Committee, and Representative Chuy Garcia, right?
Okay.
Have both indicated that immigration is going to cost $100+ billion within the budget reconciliation framework. Now, Senator Hickenlooper, the freshman from Colorado, and Senator Kaine, the old guard senator from Virginia, right? They've both indicated that immigration will be a pay for. So it really kind of depends on whether, like, depending on who you talk to, right? If you're talking to a progressive, they're like, we're going to throw some money at immigrants to make them legal, right? If you talk to sort of, I would say, more moderate members of Congress, right? They say, actually, immigrants are going to pay for a lot of this bill, right? It's going to be a pay for. So my impression is that it'll be a pay for, right? Like, immigrants will be, and Nancy Pelosi has indicated that they're going to get revenue sources from all these different places so that the budget reconciliation, in essence, pays for itself, you know? Okay. So when Nancy Pelosi indicating that, where are these sources? Where is this revenue going to come from? Well, immigrants, we get the job done. So well, that yeah. I think is why there's no way that immigration doesn't fit into the framework, because if you need something to pay, especially for these aging baby boomers who require certain family and home-based community care, who require who are going to require more and more expense, right? Bob Casey, the senator from Pennsylvania.
That's a good point. If you need a revenue source to pay for the expense of baby boomers, like, where else are you going to find potentially, 10 million new customers that are bringing in tax revenue? I mean, again, it's like
a lot of them will be taking care of these people, literally taking care of these people on a face-to-face basis.
Exactly. So that's Social Security revenue coming in, that's money coming in into the coffers. Now, granted, that's Social Security is another topic in and of itself, because there's politicians that just want to strip that up for everything else.
Payroll taxes,
everything. It's coming in. Not only that, they're going to create businesses, they're going to create jobs. They'll create jobs because immigrants create companies and they create jobs, and there'll be more revenue sources there. So really, it's kind of a win-win if you really think about it from like, hey, how are we going to pay for baby boomers? I just saw an article, and I wish I would have sent it to you, but it was basically the estimate of when the Social Security coffer is going to dry up. It's like sooner than they expected. It's like by 4 or 5 years sooner.
Like 2026, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like crazy.
I think you sent me that article.
Oh, dude. Yeah. Well, dude, I'll tell you, it's just kind of like, I think to myself, hey, man, we need some revenue coming in here, man. This is drying up. So, right. But hey, well, Pablo, listen, I know you got a lot going on. I'm glad that you're getting back into the halls of Congress this week to start kind of getting ready for when everyone gets back from recess. Definitely keep us, top of mind, and we'll talk again about what's going on with these articles. Can't wait to read the article you're going to put out today. Definitely when that's up, send it over my way. We'll take a look at that. But in the meantime, man, Pablo, keep doing the work, for the immigrant community that needs to be done. And like I always say, just do it honestly, like you do. Let the congressmen speak for themselves. Don't be the people that we're the press. We're not trying to solve those problems. We're just trying to cover it, right? So
we're just trying to get the answers. And at the same time, unfortunately, right now that the colleagues in the press who are getting it wrong, I hate to say it, but we're gonna have to start at least policing them, because I don't have as big an audience as, say, the New York Times. Right. I'm not saying the New York Times is getting it wrong, but if they do get it wrong, it's sort of like, okay, well, that's a story. You know what I mean? Because, and I'm telling you, if you're a reporter watching this, right, don't rely on the think tanks. Talk to the lawmakers themselves, or talk to the immigrants, right? Immigrants or lawmakers. These middlemen are getting it wrong and have gotten it wrong for a generation, for decades.
They get paid to get it wrong. Whoever's funding them, whoever's funding them is paying them to get it wrong, because they're getting it the way they want to position the stories. They're not getting paid to do it right.
If every immigrant becomes legal, what is the point of the Center for American Progress? It's immigration team. You know what I mean? It's just sort of like, what comes after that? Right. And not to operate completely in bad faith, you know what I mean? But if they won't get back to me, then whatever, right? I'm really, really deep in this now. I've really, really invested a lot of time in it. And when people get it wrong, it offends my sense of it offends my immigrant sense of fairness. You know what I mean?
Well,
in this country,
as it should, but that should just keep driving you to do the work that you're doing. Keep those articles coming. In the meantime, I'll tell you what, we are looking forward to having you back on. And for now, that's a wrap.
That's a wrap.